Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you today, Robert?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, Whitney?
I'm great. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. I am Whitney Wiley. That's Robert Hilliard. And this is the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. And before we get started on our topic today, a historic thing has happened in our nation. And so Ketanji Brown Jackson has been confirmed as a Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Um, it's interesting. We should probably do a whole episode on some things that are happening in terms of DEI, right? Diversity,
Mm-hmm.
equity, inclusion,
Uh-huh.
at all levels, and the importance of diversity in general. But one of the things that I saw was that since the Supreme Court was established, and I'm a lawyer, so these things are sort of interesting to me on a legal perspective. But since the Supreme Court was established in 1789, there have been 115 justices, 108 of which have been white men.
Mhm.
And this is the first time in the history of the court that they are not the majority of the court. So it'll be interesting to see how things play out
Mhm.
over time. And we're not about politics, right? We're
No.
about learning lessons. What we do here is about learning lessons that can help you to be a better leader. That's
Mhm.
that's our goal here, is to help you lead better. When you are better, you can lead better, right? Be better to lead better. And being someone who can be open-minded, taking into account other perspectives, helps you to be better so that you can lead better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. And in that vein, I'm laughing because it just, I don't know, maybe it's the tone deafness of what we're about to talk about. And I think it somewhat plays into what I just talked about for the Supreme Court, or any entity for that matter. And it doesn't have to be white men. It could be anything that's homogeneous, right? Where anything is so one perspective, one-sided. Well, and the court isn't. And I would say there are other ways that the Supreme Court could be more diverse, not just in terms of race, right? But experience is another thing that Justice uh, Jackson Brown brings, is a background in as a public defender. I don't think that's ever happened on the court. But anytime you have a group of people who have the same mindset and can get stuck in sort of a group think mentality, you're going to have challenges. So, our topic today is about an Applebee's executive. So Applebee's is a large company. It's a restaurant. They have franchises as well as some company-owned locations. And in the story that we're going to talk about today is a group of franchises. So it's owned by another corporate entity, has a number of franchise locations, and one of their executives um, was in the news recently,
Mm.
talking about high gas prices and how, because people are struggling financially, that it could be a positive for them, a boon for them, because people would be desperate and therefore willing to take lower wages, and I'm going to dare say poor working conditions, because they're desperate to have a job. And he said this put it in an email. So,
Yeah. Go ahead. See, you're a little bit speechless. It's yeah. It was when you shared it with me. You know, I try to look at all or take compassion from all sides, right? So, but when you shared it with me, I was struck with it's tone deaf, but also the hubris in which somebody would put that out there and think that other people would have the same thought. Obviously, you know, well, I don't know. Obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but the reaction of other people that got this email was like, "No, you're on your own. We don't think like this." And you know, and you need to be separated from this organization.
so yeah. So here's the interesting thing. I am not a cancel culture person. I'm not about canceling people. I am about consequences. And and even with consequences, I'm more about learning lessons, as stated
Right,
earlier. We all make mistakes, right?
right.
We all say things, think things, feel things that may not be appropriate in
For
and of
public consumption.
themselves, in, in and of themselves, right? And certainly to share in mixed company, whatever that mix is,
Right.
right? And so there is, some part of me that says, if you feel comfortable sending an email like this, a couple of things: either you really have not given any thought to what it is you're saying and the implications of what you're saying,
Right.
or you're used to sharing your thoughts like this with a group of people who share similar thoughts as you, and therefore that's why you feel comfortable doing it. There may be some other permutations on that, but those are the two things that sort of come to me. And as someone who is in a position of leadership, to have the mentality that it's okay to take advantage of people who are desperate for your own financial gain. Again, it almost leaves me speechless.
It's a little mind-boggling. I mean, you and I talk about when we talk about diversity, we also talk about diversity of thought,
A
right?
thought,
We
yes.
talk about that. Um, and one of the things that strikes me, and of course, we don't know about this person's background or whether or
Nope.
not this person spoke to other people, but one of the things that I'm a big proponent of is when you have a thought that may be a little bit different, weird, strange, go to other people and talk to those folks and see what they think about it. Have a close friend you can talk to, have another leader you can go to, have a mentor you can go to. If that person looks at you weird, probably not a good idea. So I don't know what happened prior to this person sitting down and writing, sending this email out. And I talk about having filters. There's a lot of things, that run through my mind that I go, I probably shouldn't say that out loud, or I probably, that seems weird to me. If it seems weird to me, I probably shouldn't say it to somebody else. So I don't know what kind of filter this person had, in place, whether or not that person had talked to other people and, privately. And that's something else, because sometimes people will agree with you privately on things, but they won't. If you go public with what talked about, they'll say, I never heard about that before.
Yeah.
So you need to have some kind of, especially if you're a leader, some kind of, verifying synod, for lack of a better word, a group of people you can go to and say, okay, I have this idea, and I'm struggling with it. I think it may be a little controversial. What do you think about it? But if you're only going to people that agree with you all the time, you're probably going to find yourself in trouble. So have some diversity of thought with the people that you are communicating with and bouncing ideas off of.
Definitely. So just a little bit more. So the email says that most of our employee base and potential employee base live paycheck to paycheck. Any increase in gas price cuts into their disposable income. Okay. And then sort of what follows out of that is that therefore we can hire them at lower wages. Fewer businesses will be open, so more people will be looking for work. Higher gas prices mean people need to work more, right? And so here's the thing that strikes me. And then I want to talk about the communication piece of this. And I do some training for a national training company and teach a class in collaboration, and part of that is conflict resolution, and electronic communications becomes a part of this process. And I want to get into sort of the email piece of this, or the communication piece. But before this, why this is problematic is that it is not for you as a leader to take advantage of other people's problems for your gain, right? When we think of leaders, your role as a leader is to uplift people, is to leave them better than you found them, not to take advantage of them. The other thing is that, yes, people, he may be right? Here's the thing. You may be right. He may be right that higher gas prices mean people need to work more. Maybe that means taking on additional work, a part-time job, and maybe Applebee's would be the place. And that Applebee's in particular would be the place that these people would go to get this extra work. But the atmosphere, the environment that you would be creating, I dare say, is going to result in turnover, and turnover is expensive, right? And so having an attitude of, we can just do anything we want and treat people any way we want in order to kind of keep our business going, in the long run, isn't going to serve you.
Well, it did lead to turnover, right? people quit, and
people did quit
the manager,
without notice and without locking the door when they walked away.
They just walked out, and not only that, the manager actually gave all the customers their food for free, and then left. So there you go. They weren't going to wait until this person put this plan in place.
Right.
Apparently, he was wrong. They're not that desperate. So if they're going to quit their job on the spot, if they were desperate, they'd be like, well, it seems like an awful thing, but what choice do I have? I have to stay here.
But here's the thing. I haven't been anywhere recently, in the last couple of months, certainly, that does not have a higher,
hiring sign.
A hiring sign. I was going to say a for sale sign. Hiring sign, right? His logic even is a little backward, because he's not the only place, or that place was not the only place that people had the option of going for this extra work that they need to pay for higher gas prices, right? So his logic even failed.
Right. I mean, according to his logic, they would have, if they would have seen this email, certainly they weren't intended to see this email.
And well, there's that.
Yeah. That they would have been like, well, we guess, we have to, what choice, like I said, what choice do I have? Times are hard. At least I have a job, but the other thing is there's a lack of ethics. And you and I talk about that a lot, ethics. I don't know if this person was always this way. I tend to think that he probably wasn't. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt there. but along some, along the way, they lost, the path. They left the path and became unethical, because that's not ethical. And as a leader, you should be trying to be as ethical as possible. The other thing is, the only thing you really have is your reputation. And now this person's name is besmirched. Their name is in the article. I don't think we're going to say it, right?
Right, we
Um,
don't need to. I'm
we
going
don't
to
need
post
to.
the article. If you
Yeah,
want to read it, you can read it if you haven't already. So,
right. So the person's name is, out there in a negative way. They've hurt themselves, when they go to get a job. That name, unless they change their name and go into a witness protection program, their name's going to come up. Oh wow, this name sounds like this. Did you work at Applebee's? You know, then if they lie and say that, that's another issue. So there you have it. So it caused a whole host of problems for this person. Um, when if they just would have thought it through, bounce the idea off of somebody who's credible, not somebody who is going to agree with the crazy idea,
yeah.
um, they would have saved themselves a lot of pain and suffering.
Absolutely. Which brings me to a point about emails, communication in general, emails in particular. And it's interesting. A lot of my clients are, they're in the midst of or desiring to have career transitions, which means making uh, choices about leaving someplace. Some they are doing job searches while they are working someplace.
Right.
Had a conversation with a client yesterday, wanted to know if she should have a conversation with her boss about the fact that she was looking for work, right? That she was planning to leave. And there are always ways to have every conversation. Someone told me a few years back, if you want to keep your thoughts private, keep them in your head, right? So if you put it in an email, you have to assume and you have to be okay with the world possibly reading that email,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
If I say something to you in a private conversation, it could get out, but I could always say, unless you record it, I could always say, well, Robert got that wrong.
Mhm. Mhm.
If I send you an email and you share the email and the people you share with share the email, and let's say it goes viral, there's nothing really I can do. The email says what the email says,
Yeah.
right? The words are there. How people interpret it is another story, but the words are actually there. As opposed to me and you having a conversation that's unrecorded, I can say, well, Robert got it wrong. He didn't know what he was talking about. He misunderstood me. He misheard me, whatever. If you do not want a thought that you have, the words that you say to go beyond the audience that you want, you really need to stop and think about what you're saying and how you're saying it. So, and one of the things or a system that you could put into place would be before you send off an email, before you respond to someone else's email. And I'll share a funny story of a mistake that I made and how I learned this lesson the hard way. Um, is to, as Robert mentioned earlier, is to run it by someone else, run it through a filter, right? Type your draft, sit on it, run it past someone that you trust, that is not necessarily a yes person, someone who's always in agreement with you. Run it by someone else so that they can say, are you sure this is what you want to say and the way you want to say it? Right? This is the way I'm interpreting what you're saying. Is that the message that you're sending? The other part is because written communication, emails in particular, lack a lot of what makes communication communication, the nonverbal aspects, right? Tone
Absolutely.
of voice, body language, all of that is missing. it's very easy for what you write to be misconstrued. I don't think this particular email is one of those, but I'm just saying in general, when you're writing an email and it can be controversial or you are in an emotional state, sit on it, let someone else read it, make sure it's communicating what you want to communicate before you hit send.
Especially if you're upset.
Especially if you're upset.
Because
Yeah.
it's amazing to me. It's really important before you send an email, but also when you read emails as well.
Yes.
I've been upset and read an email and got even more upset, and then went back and read the same email when I was calmer, and I was like, it doesn't say exactly what I thought it said. So you want to, had I fired off, a reply, I would have stepped in something. But I was upset enough to say, let me take a step back and reread this email because I had an exchange with somebody.
Right.
And then I went, took a break, calmed myself down, came back, reread the email, and it wasn't saying what I thought. It was in a different direction, because in my haste, because I was upset, I skipped over a very key word. When I went back, it was like, oh.
And that's typical, right? We filter things through our own lens, in our worldview,
Yep.
and the lens of the moment,
Mhm.
where we are at any particular moment in time, and that changes, right? So you read it one moment, you got something out of it, you read it later, you get something else out of it. And as a leader, it's really important that you understand these aspects of human nature, that people are not necessarily hearing, seeing, reading what you want the way you want it because that's what you want.
Mhm.
You have to put yourself, there's the empathy. We've talked about being an empathetic leader in the past, putting yourself in the shoes of someone else. So if in this particular case with the Applebee's executive, let's say he really didn't mean anything negative or derogatory. He was just sort of stating some facts, right? Let's say he was just stating some facts. He did not stop and put himself, though, in the shoes of either the other people that were on the distribution list or the subject of the email, right? And being an empathetic leader requires you to do that, to step into someone else's shoes and look at things from a different perspective, from their perspective. And then you make some decisions about, okay, do I still want to send this email now that I've run this gauntlet, put things through this filter? Because it matters. It matters, right? And financially, this turned out to be a negative for him, for his company, for the parent company, Applebee's, right? They're not even necessarily directly involved in this situation,
Right.
because this was a franchisee group that owned the Applebee's that this guy was a part of. So the parent company's not even part of that, but I can guarantee you there was some negative repercussions for Applebee's in general. Just like, weeks ago when we talked about the executive from, now I don't want to get the company wrong.
Estee Lauder.
Estee Lauder. I was
Yeah.
going to say something else, and I'm glad you caught me. Right? So it matters. It matters. It matters to you. It matters to your employer. And the end result shouldn't be that we just get rid of people, that we cancel them. There should be some learning that is, these are teachable moments and opportunities for people to be better so that they can, again, lead better.
Yeah. But I want to say this in a way that's not highfalutin, but there You know me. There are a lot of ways that you can do that. You need to, as a leader, you need to educate yourself in some way.
Yes.
And education, we are big proponents of formal education, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a formal education. Read some things. And, I was in preparing for this talk that we're having right now. I started looking at some things, and we mentioned this when we were talking on Sunday. And I said, I like to look at things or pass through 3 filters or 3 gates. And I was like, where did I hear that? And so I did some research and realized where I heard it from. The Persian poet Rumi says here, I'm going to read this. It says, before you speak, let your words pass through 3 gates. At the first gate, ask yourself, is it true? Right? Really important there. Is it true? Will other people believe or think that this is going to be something that's good for the company? At the second gate, ask yourself, is it necessary? Right? If is it necessary to do that? And at the third gate, ask yourself, is it kind? So this is written centuries ago, but there's still the wisdom still applies. And there are ways to educate yourself. And I heard this a long time ago, and I couldn't remember where I heard it from, but I was like, I got to figure out where I learned that. But I always try to do that. Now, am I always successful? No, I am not. But I have a lot more success than I used to before I started doing that. Just blurting things out and saying things, doesn't, especially when those things can be controversial, may not be the best thing for you to do.
Right. And this is not about perfection.
No.
Right. This is not about always getting it right. This is about taking the time. I think ultimately it becomes about taking the time, right? And education and surrounding yourself with people who don't think necessarily exactly the way you do, so that you can be challenged to, again, look at other perspectives, to see this in someone else's light. And I get that this dude is a corporate executive or a franchise executive or whatever. And his mindset is about his company's bottom line.
Yeah.
But the thing is, your bottom line depends on people. Therefore, you have to be someone who's about people to improve your bottom line. Your bottom line should not be about, again, taking advantage of others, running roughshod over them. But how can you, like you said, you run it through those 3 filters, be kind in the process of doing what you're doing. And if you're people centric, right, he could have gotten to the same result that he's looking for, which is to bring on, more people, or, to, even if they didn't pay, I'm not even sure how you could pay them less. I don't know many restaurants that pay more than the minimum wage. So I don't know how much less you could pay people. And maybe that franchise chain pays above minimum wage. I don't know.
We don't know. Right.
I do not know. So that disclaimer, but my pretty much people starting in restaurants, wait staff, service staff, start at minimum wage, whatever that is where you are. So I don't know how much less they could have been paid.
Well, that's kind of implied in his message. In his message, like, well, these folks are already desperate. So it's kind of implied there that they're, it's not like they're paying a whole lot of money. That money is obviously already an issue with these folks. And I just, I wonder, let's take a look at the flip side of that. I wonder what the response would have been if he said, listen, we want to, ask the people that work for, him, we want to, make more money, save more money, whatever. What are some of the ideas that you have? Gotten them involved. Maybe you use those ideas, maybe you don't. But, you guys are our most guys and, and gals, you people.
Let's not offended.
are our most important resource. So I'm coming to you to ask, what can we do? There's some things happening in the economy. What are some of your ideas? I think that would have been, and you would have that diversity of thought. You would have included those people, the people that will be actually doing the work for the organization. They would have more ownership, more accountability. I don't know if it would help them. Generally, I feel better when I was working for a company, when the leaders would come and say, look, we want to get some of your input in something that
Yes.
we want to do. It helped me feel better. So, and I'm certain it will have, the same effect on them. So, maybe this person, and that's why it's good to educate yourself, because those are things that people typically do when they have successful strategy meetings. They go to the people
Yeah.
that work for the organization. They don't just say, we're gonna do this thing, and we're gonna send out this email, and who cares if what these people think? They work for us, and we're
Here's the other thing, that the way to improve your bottom line isn't always through cutting. Right. And so you're saying, what if we looked at the flip side of this? What if, as part of, tapping into the resource, that their actual human capital, those that are working for them, tapping into them for other ideas? What if they said, instead of taking advantage of you, looking for ways to cut your pay, to bring in desperate people, we actually improve the environment here. We actually pay you more than minimum wage, or minimally what we have been paying, right? And we create a different environment, so that it's not one of desperation, that it's one where people want to come work here because this is a good place to work. The benefit of that is that they would create the environment that your customers want to come to, right? And I think about an environment, if I'm going to someplace and everybody there is a sourpuss, and they're unhappy being there, they're probably not going to give great service, right? And this is not a walk-up counter, necessarily a walk-up counter kind of place. You can do to-go orders, sure, but this is not where you just walk up,
you sit down,
pay your money, and walk away with something, right? This is where you're going to sit down and have interaction. I don't want to have interactions with staff that are not pleasant while I'm having a dining experience, even at an Applebee's level. Right. I get it. It's not, the 5-star Michelin restaurant or whatever, but it is still a place. If I'm going to go, I want to have a pleasant experience. Therefore, I want your employees to have a pleasant attitude and demeanor, so that I can enjoy my time in your restaurant. If they are there with bad attitudes and attitudes of desperation, I'm probably not going to get that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's very true. You make the place somewhere where people want to come
to work.
Yeah, and not a place where people are going to feel like they can't leave, right? I'm stuck here. They're not going to be happy. And you said it very well. But I also think that a lot of leaders inhabit an alternate universe than the people that work for them. Not all, but some. I remember I was working in an organization, and was trying to bring to the senior leadership's attention that that morale was bad in the organization, and it was suffering, and that there were some customer service issues. And it was one of those organizations where the people that worked for the organization can also get their services there. And so this senior leadership was like, well, I always get great service. I'm like, of course you get great service. No one's going to tell the COO, give the COO bad service, or the CEO bad service. it's a different, you're going to get the
Yeah.
best service because of your status. And so, so because of that, it confirmed to them that things are great. And then when they found out that things weren't so great, they were like, how come no one told me about this? Like, oh, I did. Had a conversation with you about it. So this person, in this Applebee's example, clearly was living in an alternate universe, a universe where his peers thought, his colleagues thought that this will be a great idea. So let me go ahead and send out this email that I'm sure is going to be received warmly, and I'm going to be heralded as a hero who saved
Right.
the
Because
organization.
you're trying to save us
Save-
and
save
make
money.
us money. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so clearly living in an alternate universe and not being in touch with what's really going on. And that is the danger. When you don't interact with people, you don't listen to other people, you're not really seeing things, and that your ego is such that you can't accept, constructive feedback. I think that's one thing that I think a lot of leaders could learn from. You need to be able to take constructive feedback no matter who it comes from. And I think that and look, leaders are human, and no one likes to hear that they don't do something well, right? It's really difficult for some people to take that, but you'll be better off if you know that maybe you don't do it well, maybe you don't deliver, whatever it is. Maybe you don't deliver bad news well, maybe you don't deliver praise well, whatever it is. Be able to get that feedback. Maybe you don't send out appropriate emails. Get that feedback so you can learn from it, and you can grow and you can become a better leader.
I agree. So I promised a story. My email story, and I'll share this before we wrap up. So in my last role as a legislative advocate, as a lobbyist, I was working, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of my almost 18-year career there. I was working on a particular piece of legislation that was controversial, had some pretty high profile opposition to it, that we were sponsoring a bill. And I got an email from someone opposing the bill. And I thought I was forwarding it to someone else. And instead, somehow I hit reply and I added these other names and I made a derogatory comment about someone. So this goes to your point about being emotional when, shooting off something in the midst of being emotional, and not running it through any of the filters of whether it was true, whether it was necessary, and or kind. While it was true, it wasn't necessary or kind, and it was sloppy. Because I did not check to see who it was going out to, the audience to whom it was going out to. And then I had to eat crow, right? Because even though this person was in opposition, it was still someone that I had to work with and try to find a positive outcome, some win-win for both sides. And that, let's just say, made it more difficult. So going back, your thoughts, you're entitled to your thoughts. But one, you need to think about whether or not you need to share them. And if there is a need to share them, think about the way you choose to share them, right? And with whom. Run it through the filters, run it through Rumi's filters, run it past a trusted colleague or friend who will tell you the truth of whether or not you are communicating what it is you intend to communicate. And if after doing all that, you choose to send it, then you get to live with the consequences. And so, in the end, as leaders, that's one of the things that's why you get paid the big bucks, right? Is to make decisions, make choices, take actions. Sometimes they are not popular. They are hard for other people, but you have to own them and the consequences that come along with them. I give you the final word, Robert.
Use some kind of filter. Rumi's filter is, I don't mean, I didn't mean to make you, Rumi's filter, Rumi's poem, it has a lot of wisdom in there, as do, all of his poems. Use a filter, grab somebody who doesn't always agree with you. I can't really emphasize that enough. It should be somebody that doesn't always agree with you. And that way you can trust that they're trying to give you some constructive, objective feedback.
I like it. And with that, we want to thank you for joining us for this episode of The State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. We are here on Thursdays at 12 noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. If there's a topic you'd like for us to cover, please drop us a line. And if there's anything that we can do to be of assistance to you, whether as a coach or a consultant, please reach out. We are available to help you to be better so you can lead better. And so until next time, take care.
Bye now.